Jake Morrison stood in the command center of the UES Meridian, watching the stars through the large viewing window. The coffee in his hands had gone cold hours ago, but he barely noticed. His mind was focused on the strange message that had arrived. From Harmony 7 Research Station 3 days earlier, the message had been brief but urgent. Dr. Lisa Ching, the station's top scientist, had made a discovery about the alien race called the Resonance. These mysterious beings had been avoiding contact with all other species for months now. Nobody knew why they had suddenly become so distant and unfriendly. Jake had been chosen to lead the mission to find out what was happening. At 35 years old, he had already led 12 successful first contact missions. His calm nature and quick thinking had saved lives more than once when dealing with unknown alien species. The door to the command center opened with a soft hiss. Amy Rodriguez walked in, carrying a tablet filled with data. She was the ship's communications expert, a young woman who could speak 7 different alien languages fluently. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her brown eyes showed the same concern that Jake felt. "Sir, I've been going through all the old communications with the Resonance," Amy said, setting her tablet down on the main console. "Something strange is happening to their language patterns." Jake turned away from the window to face her. "What do you mean?" Amy pulled up a series of sound waves on the main screen. The patterns looked like music, with flowing lines that rose and fell like ocean waves. "The Resonance don't speak with words like we do. They communicate using sounds, like music. But look at these recent messages compared to older ones." She switched between 2 different patterns. Jake could see the difference, even though he didn't understand the alien language. The older patterns were rich and complex, with many layers of sound working together. The newer ones looked simple and broken, like a song with missing notes. "Their communications are getting weaker," Amy continued. "It's like they're losing their ability to speak properly." Before Jake could respond, another voice came from behind them. "Maybe they're not losing their ability. Maybe they're dying." They turned to see Pete Collins walking into the command center. The ship's engineer was a tall, thin man with graying hair and steady hands. He had worked on alien technology for over 20 years and had seen many strange things in his career. "Dying?" Jake asked. "What makes you think that?" Pete moved to stand beside Amy at the console. "I've been studying the technical data from Harmony 7. The Resonance aren't just a species that likes music. Music is how they think. It's how their brains work. If something is damaging their ability to make complex sounds, it could be killing them." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. If Pete was right, they weren't just dealing with unfriendly aliens. They were looking at the possible extinction of an entire species. "How long until we reach Harmony 7? Jake asked. 6 hours, Amy replied, checking her tablet. Jake nodded. "Send a message to Dr. Chun. Tell her we'll need all her research ready when we arrive. And Amy, start preparing our translation equipment. We might need to communicate with the Resonance directly." As his crew went to work, Jake returned to looking out at the stars. He thought about the Resonance and what they might be facing. In all his years of first contact missions, he had learned that every alien species was unique. Some were aggressive warriors. Others were peaceful traders. Some were so different from humans that communication seemed impossible at first. But the Resonance had always been special. They were one of the few species that seemed to understand beauty in the same way humans did. Their music was complex and emotional, touching something deep in anyone who heard it. The idea that such a species might be dying made Jake's chest feel tight with sadness. The Meridian flew through space at maximum speed, its engines humming quietly in the background. Jake's crew worked efficiently, preparing for whatever they might find at Harmony 7. Each of them knew that this mission could be different from any they had faced before. In her quarters, Amy continued studying the resonant language patterns. She played their older communications through her headphones, trying to understand the subtle changes in their musical speech. The beauty of their language amazed her. It was like listening to a symphony that told stories, shared emotions, and communicated complex ideas all at the same time. But as she listened to the newer messages, she heard something that made her heart sink. Fear. The resonants were afraid of something, and that fear was affecting their ability to communicate. Their once beautiful musical language was becoming broken and desperate. Meanwhile, Pete worked in the engineering section, preparing special equipment that might help them communicate with the resonants. He had designed devices that could translate human speech into musical patterns and vice versa. But if the resonants were losing their ability to create complex music, his equipment might not be enough. As the hours passed, Jake found himself thinking about his own species. Humans had always been good at adapting to new situations. They were curious, brave, and willing to take risks to help others. But they had also made mistakes. Sometimes their desire to help had made things worse. This time felt different, though. The resonants had been peaceful neighbors in their part of the galaxy. They had never asked for help, never caused trouble, and never threatened anyone. If they were in danger, it was humanity's duty to try to save them. The ship's computer announced that they were approaching Harmony 7. Jake called his senior crew to the command center. Amy arrived first, followed by Pete and the ship's medical officer, Dr. Helen Kim. Dr. Kim was a specialist in alien biology and psychology. Her knowledge of how different species thought and felt had been valuable on many missions. Status report, Jake said as they gathered around the main console. Harmony 7 is responding to our communications, Amy reported. Dr. Chun is waiting for us. She says the situation with the resonance has gotten worse since she sent her message. Worse how? Dr. Kim asked. Amy's face was grim. They've stopped communicating altogether. Complete silence for the past 2 days. Jake felt his stomach drop. Complete silence from a species that communicated through music could only mean one thing. They were either already dead or very close to it. Take us in, Jake ordered, and prepare for emergency protocols. We might be looking at the extinction of an entire species, and we might be the only ones who can stop it. The Meridian moved toward Harmony 7, carrying humanity's best hope of saving a dying alien race. None of them knew that this mission would change not just the fate of the resonance, but the future of interstellar diplomacy forever. The Meridian docked with Harmony 7 research station without any problems. Jake Morrison led his team through the connecting tunnel, their footsteps echoing in the metal corridor. The research station felt cold and quiet, very different from the busy atmosphere Jake expected from a major scientific facility. Dr. Lisa Chun met them at the airlock door. She was a small woman in her 40s, with tired eyes and messy hair. Her white lab coat had coffee stains on it, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Behind her stood 2 other researchers, both looking equally exhausted. Commander Morrison, thank you for coming so quickly, Dr. Chun said, shaking Jake's hand firmly. I'm afraid the situation is much worse than when I sent my first message. Jake introduced his team to Dr. Chun and her colleagues. Amy Rodriguez immediately began asking questions about the resonant communication patterns, while Pete Collins wanted to see their technical equipment. Dr. Helen Kim focused on the biological aspects of what they had discovered. Dr. Chun led them through the station to her main laboratory. The room was filled with computers, sound equipment, and strange devices that Jake didn't recognize. Large screens showed wave patterns and musical notations from the resonant communications. Let me explain what we've learned, Dr. Chun began, pointing to one of the screens. The resonants don't just use music to talk to each other. Music is how they think. Their brains work completely differently from ours. She played a recording of an old resonant conversation. The sound filled the room like a beautiful symphony. Jake could hear multiple voices creating harmony together, with each voice adding layers of meaning to the overall message. This recording is from 6 months ago, Dr. Chun continued. Listen to how complex it is. Every note, every rhythm, every harmony carries information. It's like they're thinking out loud, but in perfect musical coordination. Amy leaned forward, fascinated. How many resonants are speaking in this recording? 12, Dr. Chun replied. But they're not just speaking. They're sharing thoughts, emotions, and ideas all at the same time. Their entire society works this way. They make decisions together through musical conversations that can last for hours or even days. Pete frowned as he studied the technical readouts. If this is how they normally communicate, what's happening to them now? Dr. Chun's expression became sad. She switched to a more recent recording. The difference was shocking. Instead of the rich, complex symphony from before, this recording sounded broken and simple. Only a few voices could be heard, and they seemed to struggle to create even basic harmony. This is from 2 weeks ago, Dr. Chun said, and this is from 5 days ago. The next recording was even worse, with just 2 or 3 voices making simple, repetitive sounds. And this is from 2 days ago, she added, playing the final recording. There was nothing but silence. The room fell quiet as everyone absorbed what they had heard. Dr. Kim was the first to speak. It's like watching a language die in real time. Exactly, Dr. Chun nodded. But it's worse than that. For the resonants, losing their ability to communicate in harmony means losing their ability to think clearly. Their individual minds are connected through their musical communication. Without it, they're becoming isolated and confused. Jake felt a heavy weight in his chest. Do we know what's causing this? Dr. Chun walked to another computer and pulled up images of the resonant homeworld Symphonia. The planet looked beautiful from space, with swirling blue and green clouds covering most of its surface. The problem is happening on their homeworld, she explained. Symphonia has unique acoustic properties. The entire planet acts like a giant musical instrument. The resonants evolved to use these natural sound patterns as part of their communication system. She showed them more detailed images of the planet's surface. Jake could see large cities and industrial complexes that hadn't been there in older. Photos. Other species in their star system have been expanding their industrial operations, Dr. Chung continued. Mining, manufacturing, and transportation activities are creating noise pollution that's disrupting Symphonia's natural acoustic environment. Amy shook her head in disbelief. So they're being poisoned by noise? In a way, yes, Dr. Chun confirmed. The industrial noise is interfering with their ability to hear and create the complex harmonies they need for communication. It's like trying to have a conversation during a thunderstorm, except the thunderstorm never stops. Pete studied the technical data more carefully. Have the other species been told about this problem? We've tried, Dr. Chun said with frustration in her voice. But they claim their activities are legal according to galactic trade agreements. They say the resonance should adapt to the changing environment instead of expecting everyone else to change for them. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. The idea that an entire species might die because of someone else's industrial noise seemed incredibly unfair. Dr. Kim had been quiet during most of the explanation, but now she spoke up. Have you tried to communicate with the resonants directly? To let them know we want to help, Dr. Chun sighed. We've tried everything we can think of. Traditional translation methods don't work with their musical language. We need someone who can actually think in music, not just translate words into notes. Amy's eyes lit up with an idea. What about human musicians? There are people on Earth who improvise complex harmonies naturally. Street performers, jazz musicians, people who create music without formal training. That's an interesting thought, Dr. Chun said. But we would need musicians who can not only create complex harmonies, but also learn to interpret meaning from musical patterns they've never heard before. Jake remembered something he had seen in recent news reports from Earth. There are some young street performers who have become famous across human space. They broadcast their performances over the communication networks. I've seen their work. They're incredibly talented at blending different musical styles together. Pete nodded enthusiastically. I know who you're talking about. There's a girl and a boy who perform together sometimes. They can take any song, and make it sound completely different, but still beautiful. They improvise harmonies that seem impossible. Dr. Chun looked hopeful for the first time since they had arrived. Do you think they will be willing to come here? To try communicating with an alien species through music? There's only one way to find out, Jake said. Amy, send a priority message to Earth Command. We need Casey Mitchell and Danny Brooks brought to Symphonia as quickly as possible. Amy started working on her tablet immediately. What should I tell them about why we need street performers on a first contact mission? Jake looked at the silent screens that should have been filled with resonant music. Tell them that 2 young musicians might be humanity's best hope for preventing the extinction of an entire alien species. And tell them we don't have much time. As Amy sent the message, Jake wondered if they were making the right choice. Asking untrained civilians to attempt communication with a dying alien species seemed desperate. But as he listened to the recordings of the residents' fading voices, he realized that desperate times called for desperate measures. The fate of an entire species might depend on whether 2 human street performers could learn to speak in alien music. Casey Mitchell stared there at the official message on her tablet, reading it for the 4th time. The words still didn't make sense to her. The Earth government wanted her and Danny Brooks to travel to an alien planet to help save a dying species. Through music. It sounded like something from a science fiction movie. She sat in her small apartment in downtown Seattle, surrounded by the musical instruments she had collected over the years. Her guitar leaned against the wall next to a keyboard, a violin, and several other instruments she had taught herself to play. Through her window, she could see the busy street where she and Danny performed almost every day. Casey was 22 years old and had been performing on the streets since she was 16. She had never planned to become famous, but somehow, her videos had spread across the human colonies. People seemed to love watching her take popular songs and transform them into something completely new. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Danny's name appeared on the screen. Casey, did you get the same crazy message I did? Danny asked as soon as she answered. About going to space to talk to aliens through music. Yeah, I got it, Casey replied, still trying to process the information. They want us to report to the spaceport in 6 hours, Danny said. This has to be some kind of joke, right? Casey looked at the official seals and signatures on the message. I don't think it's a joke, Danny. This looks real. Danny was quiet for a moment. Are you going to go? Casey thought about it. She had never left Earth before. The idea of traveling to another planet was both exciting and terrifying. But the message had said that an entire alien species was dying, and somehow their music might be able to help. I think we have to, she said finally. If there's even a small chance we can help save these aliens, we should try. 3 hours later, Casey and Danny met at the spaceport. They both carried small bags with their essential belongings and their favorite instruments. Casey had brought her acoustic guitar and a small keyboard. Danny carried his violin and a digital sound mixer. The government official who met them was a serious-looking woman in a military uniform. She introduced herself as Colonel Sarah Martinez and explained that they would be traveling on a military transport ship to reach the Meridian as quickly as possible. I have to be honest with you, Colonel Martinez said as they walked toward the ship. We've never asked civilians to participate in a first contact mission before, but the situation is desperate, and our experts believe you might be our only hope. The transport ship was smaller than Casey had expected, but it was equipped with the latest technology for interstellar travel. As they left Earth's atmosphere, Casey pressed her face against the window and watched her home planet grow smaller below them. The journey to meet the Meridian took 2 days. During that time, Casey and Danny studied everything they could about the resonance. They listened to recordings of the alien music and tried to understand how it worked as a language. It's like jazz, but more complex, Danny observed as they listened to one of the older recordings. Multiple improvised melodies, working together to create meaning. Casey nodded, playing along with the recording on her guitar. But it's not just about the notes. The emotions in the music seem to carry information too. When the harmony changes, the meaning changes. They practice creating their own harmonic conversations, using their instruments to ask questions and give answers without words. It was difficult at first, but they began to understand how music could carry complex ideas. When they finally reached the Meridian, Jake Morrison welcomed them aboard personally. Casey was surprised by how young the commander looked. She had expected someone older and more intimidating. "Thank you for coming," Jake said as he led them through the ship. "I know this must seem strange, but we believe you're our best chance of communicating with the resonance." Amy Rodriguez met them in the ship's main conference room. She had prepared a detailed briefing about everything they knew about resonant communication. Casey and Danny listened carefully as Amy explained how the aliens thought in music. The challenge is that their musical language is completely different from human music, Amy explained. They use harmonies and rhythms that don't exist in our musical traditions. But you've both shown an ability to adapt and improvise with unfamiliar musical styles. Dr. Helen Kim joined the meeting to discuss the psychological aspects of communicating. With the resonance, we believe they're experiencing something like depression or anxiety because they can't communicate properly with each other. When you try to talk to them, you'll need to project calm and friendly emotions through your music. Casey felt nervous but excited. How do we know if we're saying the right things? What if we accidentally insult them or make them more upset? Jake smiled for the first time since they had met. "That's what makes you perfect for this job. You're both natural improvisers. You'll listen to what they're trying to say and respond in the moment. That's something our translation computers can't do." The next day, the Meridian arrived at Symphonia. Casey and Danny stood on the bridge, looking down at the alien planet. It was beautiful, with strange colors swirling through its atmosphere. But when they listened to the planet's natural sounds through the ship's sensors, they could hear the problem immediately. "That industrial noise is awful," Danny said, wincing as harsh mechanical sounds mixed with the planet's natural harmonies. "It's like someone is playing a drum set during a symphony." Casey could hear the few remaining resonant voices trying to communicate through the noise. Their music sounded sad and desperate, like a cry for help that no one could hear. "We need to get closer," Casey said. "If we're going to help them, we need to understand what they're trying to say." Jake arranged for a small shuttle to take them down to the planet's surface. As they descended through Symphonia's atmosphere, the natural acoustic properties of the planet became more obvious. The very air seemed to carry and amplify sounds in unique ways. They landed near a resonant settlement, a beautiful city that seemed to be built to enhance and direct sound waves. The buildings were curved and flowing, designed to work with the planet's natural harmonics. But the beauty was marred by the constant noise from nearby industrial operations. Casey and Danny set up their instruments near the edge of the settlement. They could see resonant figures in the distance, tall and graceful beings who moved like dancers. But the aliens seemed hesitant to approach, hiding in the shadows of their own city. "They're afraid," Danny observed. "They don't know if we're here to help or hurt them." Casey began playing a simple, gentle melody on her guitar. She tried to put all her peaceful intentions into the music, hoping the resonance would understand that she meant no harm. After several minutes, one of the resonants moved closer. It was a tall, elegant being with skin that seemed to shimmer with different colors. When it began to sing, its voice was like nothing Casey had ever heard before. The resonant song was beautiful, but filled with sadness. Casey could hear the pain in every note, the frustration of being unable to communicate properly with its own kind. She began to play along, matching the alien's melody and adding her own harmonies. Danny joined in with his violin, creating a three-way musical conversation. For the first time in months, a resonant was able to communicate in proper harmony with other voices. More resonants began to emerge from their hiding places, drawn by the beautiful music. Casey and Danny realized they had just taken the first step towards saving an entire species. Casey Mitchell had been playing music with the residents for 3 days, and she was beginning to understand their language. Each note carried emotions, each harmony told a story, and each rhythm shared memories. But what she learned from the aliens made her heart feel heavy with sadness. The resident who had first approached them was named something that sounded like a gentle song when translated. Casey called him Echo because his voice seemed to carry the memory of better times. Echo had been trying to tell her about his people's history through music, and the story was heartbreaking. Danny Brooks sat beside Casey, his violin ready in his hands. He had learned to follow Echo's musical patterns, adding support and harmony when needed. Around them, more than 20 residents had gathered, all desperate to join in the musical conversation they had been unable to have for months. "They're telling us about their council," Casey whispered to Danny during a quiet moment. "There's a group of elder residents who make all the important decisions for their people. But the council hasn't been able to meet properly because of the noise pollution." Danny nodded, understanding the problem. If they can't communicate in harmony, they can't make decisions together. Their whole government is breaking down. Jake Morrison watched from nearby, along with Dr. Chun and the rest of the team. They had set up monitoring equipment to record everything, hoping to understand how the musical communication worked. But Jake could see that time was running out. Amy Rodriguez approached him with a worried expression. "Commander, we're receiving messages from the Galactic Council. The hegemony is demanding action about the resident situation." Jake's stomach dropped. The hegemony was a military alliance of several aggressive alien species. They had never been patient with diplomatic solutions, preferring to solve problems with force. "What kind of action are they demanding?" Jake asked. "They claim the resonance. Withdrawal from galactic communication is a security threat," Amy replied. "They want permission to send warships to this system to investigate." Jake looked at Casey and Danny, who were still playing music with the resonance. The young musicians had no idea that their peaceful musical conversation might be interrupted by an alien invasion. "How long do we have?" Jake asked. "The hegemony fleet is already moving," Amy said. "They'll be here in less than 2 days." Jake made a quick decision. "Don't tell Casey and Danny yet. Let them focus on communicating with the resonance. But prepare our defenses and send a message to Earth Command. We might need backup." While Jake dealt with the military threat, Casey continued her musical conversation with Echo. She was learning that the Resident Council needed to make a decision about their entire species' future. They could try to relocate to another planet, but that would mean leaving behind their home and their connection to Symphonia's natural harmonics. Or they could stay and slowly die as the industrial noise destroyed their ability to think and communicate. "There has to be another choice," Casey said, trying to express the idea through her guitar. She played a melody that suggested hope and new possibilities. Echo responded with a complex harmony that Casey was beginning to recognize as curiosity. The resident wanted to know what other choice might exist. Pete Collins had been working on technical solutions since they arrived on Symphonia. He approached Casey during her next break from playing. "I've been studying the industrial operations that are causing the noise," Pete said. "Most of it comes from mining equipment and manufacturing plants. The good news is that the technology exists to make those operations much quieter." Casey looked hopeful. "Can we convince the other species to change their equipment?" Pete's expression was grim. "That's the problem. Retrofitting all their operations would be expensive and time-consuming. They have no legal obligation to make changes, and they're not willing to hurt their profits to help the resonance." Danny had been listening to the conversation. "What if we could prove that helping the resonance would actually benefit everyone?" "What do you mean?" Pete asked. Danny looked thoughtful. "Echo has been trying to tell us something about their technology. I think the resonants know things about sound and acoustics that could be valuable to other species." Casey's eyes widened as she understood what Danny was suggesting. She immediately began playing a new melody, asking Echo to share more information about resonant technology. Echo's response was excited and complex. He began calling other residents to join the conversation, and soon Casey and Danny were in the middle of the most complicated musical discussion they had ever. EXPRIENCD Dr. Helen Kim helped translate what the residents were trying to communicate. They're talking about something called harmonic restoration, she said. It sounds like they can use controlled sound waves to heal damaged environments. Pete's face lit up with understanding. That's incredible. If they can restore ecosystems using acoustic technology, it will revolutionize environmental science across the galaxy. Casey felt a surge of excitement. This could be the solution they needed. If the residents could offer valuable technology in exchange for a quiet environment, the other species might be willing to negotiate. But first, they needed to communicate this idea to the resident council. Echo explained through music that the council members were scattered across the planet, unable to travel because the noise made it impossible for them to navigate using their natural harmonic senses. We need to bring them together, Casey said. But how can we do that if they can't travel? Danny had an idea. What if we create a musical beacon? Something so clear and strong that it can cut through the industrial noise and guide them here? Casey understood immediately. They would need to perform the most complex musical piece of their lives, something that could carry across the entire planet and unite the scattered resident council members. Echo became very excited when they explained their plan. He began singing a melody that Casey recognized as the traditional song used to call council meetings. But the melody was incomplete, missing the harmonies that would make it powerful enough to reach across the planet. He needs our help to complete the song, Casey realized. But this isn't just any song. It's like their national anthem, their constitution, and their emergency broadcast system all rolled into one. Danny gripped his violin tighter. How long will we need to play? Echo's response made both musicians pale. The complete council calling song would need to be performed continuously for 3 days and 3 nights. Any break in the music would mean starting over from the beginning. Casey looked at Danny, seeing her own determination reflected in his eyes. We can do this, she said. We have to do this. Jake approached them with grave news. I need to tell you something. The hegemony fleet will arrive tomorrow. If they don't see progress in the resident situation, they might decide to solve the problem with military force. Casey felt her heart race. What does that mean? Jake's expression was serious. It means you'll be performing the most important concert in galactic history. The fate of the resident species, and possibly interstellar peace, depends on whether you can bring their council together before the hegemony decides to take action. Danny stood up, his violin in hand. Then we better start practicing. As the sun set over Symphonia, Casey and Danny began preparing for the performance of their lives. They had less than 24 hours to learn a song that would either save an entire species or watch helplessly as an ancient civilization die forever. Casey Mitchell's fingers were bleeding, but she didn't stop playing. She had been performing the council calling song for 18 hours straight, and her guitar strings felt like fire against her fingertips. Beside her, Danny Brooks continued, playing his violin, sweat dripping down his face despite the cool morning air on Symphonia. Echo and 12 other residents surrounded them, adding their voices to the complex musical call. The song had grown more beautiful and powerful as more aliens joined in, but Casey could feel the strain on everyone involved. The residents were pushing their damaged vocal abilities to the limit, trying to create harmonies that could cut through the industrial noise and reach their scattered council members. Jake, Morrison paced back and forth near their performance area, constantly checking his communication device for updates from space. The hegemony fleet had arrived in the star system 2 hours ago and was demanding immediate answers about the resident situation. Status report, Jake said into his communicator. Amy. Rodriguez's voice crackled back from the meridian in orbit. The hegemony commander is losing patience, sir. He's given us 6 more hours to show progress, or he's sending troops down to the planet. Casey heard the conversation but forced herself to keep playing. She could feel something happening in the music around her. Echo's voice was getting stronger, and the other residents were beginning to harmonize in ways they hadn't been able to do for months. "It's working," whispered Dr. Hellingtium, who was monitoring the resident communications. "I'm detecting response signals from across the planet. The council members are hearing the call." Danny smiled despite his exhaustion. His violin had become an extension of his body, flowing with melodies that seemed to know exactly what the residents needed to hear. He had discovered that by listening carefully to Echo's musical patterns, he could predict what harmony would come next and support it perfectly. Pete Collins worked frantically nearby, adjusting his sound amplification, equipment to help their music travel farther across the planet. "I'm detecting 7 separate response signals so far," he reported. "The council members are trying to respond to the call." But as the hours passed, a new problem became clear. The council members were responding to the musical call, but they were still too far away to reach the performance site. The industrial noise made it difficult for them to navigate, and many of them were weak from months of communication isolation. "The closest council member is still 300 miles away," Dr. Tim reported, "at the speed they can travel through the noise. Interference, it will take them at least 2 more days to get here." Casey's heart sank. They didn't have 2 more days. The hegemony fleet would attack long before the council could assemble. Echo seemed to understand the problem. His musical communication became urgent and desperate. Casey could hear him trying to explain something important, but the concept was too complex for her limited understanding of resonant language. "He's trying to tell us something about the council meeting," Danny said, pausing briefly in his playing. "Something about not needing to be in the same place." Dr. Kim leaned closer, listening carefully to Echo's musical explanation. "I think he's saying they can hold a council meeting at a distance, but only if the musical connection is strong enough." Casey felt a spark of hope. "You mean we can create a musical bridge between all the council members? Connect them through our performance, even though they're scattered across the planet?" Echo's excited harmony confirmed that she understood correctly, but his next musical phrase made her stomach drop. Creating a planet-wide musical connection would require far more complex harmonies than they had been playing so far. "How complex?" Danny asked, reading the worry in Casey's expression. Echo began demonstrating the type of harmonies they would need. The music was unlike anything Casey had ever heard. It required multiple melody lines playing simultaneously, with each line representing a different council member's voice. The human musicians would need to channel not just their own musical abilities, but somehow carry the voices of resonants hundreds of miles away. Pete looked up from his equipment. "I might be able to help with the technical side. If I can boost our signal strength and create acoustic relay points, we might be able to maintain the connection across the planet." "Do it," Jake ordered. "Whatever you need." As Pete worked on the technical solution, Casey and Danny prepared for the most challenging musical performance of their lives. They would need to maintain not just one continuous song, but multiple interweaving melodies that represented different council members across Symphonia. Amy's voice came through Jake's communicator again. "Commander, the hegemony ships are moving into attack formation. Their commander says he won't wait any longer for a diplomatic solution." Jake made a desperate decision. "Put me in direct contact with the hegemony commander." Within minutes, Jake was speaking directly to Commander Vex, the leader of the hegemony fleet. Vex was a member of a warrior species that had never been known for patience or understanding. "Commander Morrison," Vex's voice was harsh and threatening, "my orders are clear. If the resonance cannot be made to communicate with the galactic council within the next 4 hours, I am authorized to use force to secure this system." "Commander Vex, we are in the middle of a breakthrough," Jake replied, trying to keep his voice calm. "The resonants are not being hostile. They are dying because of environmental damage to their planet. We are attempting to facilitate a council meeting that could solve this crisis peacefully." "I care nothing for resonant politics," Vex replied. "They have ignored Galactic Council communications for months. This is a security matter now." Casey had been listening to the conversation while continuing to play. Suddenly she had an idea. She began modifying her guitar melody, adding musical elements that she hoped would reach beyond the planet's atmosphere. "Danny, follow my lead," she whispered. "We're going to try something crazy." Danny trusted Casey completely and began matching her new musical direction. Within minutes, their combined music was being amplified by Pete's equipment and broadcast into space as well as across Symphonia. On the Hegemony ships, something unexpected happened. Vex and his crew began hearing the music through their communication systems. The beautiful, complex harmonies were unlike anything they had ever experienced. "What is that sound?" Vex demanded. Amy quickly responded from the Meridian. "That's human musicians communicating with the Resonant Council. You're hearing the first successful diplomatic contact between our species and theirs in months." As the music continued, something remarkable occurred. The Resonant Council members across the planet began joining the musical conversation, their voices carried by Pete's relay system. For the first time in months, the entire Resonant government was communicating in harmony. Even more surprising, the music seemed to affect the Hegemony crew. Commander Vex found himself listening intently to the complex harmonies, experiencing emotions he had never felt before. "This music," Vex said slowly, "it carries meaning beyond words." Jake seized the opportunity. "Commander, you're experiencing what the Resonants call harmonic communication. It's not just music to them. It's how they think, how they govern, how they make decisions as a unified people." The musical conversation between the Resonant Council members grew stronger and more complex. Casey and Danny were exhausted, but they could feel they were part of something historic. They were witnessing the rebirth of an entire civilization's ability to communicate. Echo's voice rose above the others, carrying what sounded like a formal proposal. The other council members responded with harmonies that Casey interpreted as agreement and excitement. "They're making a decision," Dr. Kim reported. "The council is agreeing to share their harmonic restoration technology with other species in exchange for environmental protection of their planet." Commander Vex was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. "Commander Morrison, request permission to send a diplomatic team to the planet's surface. I believe the Hegemony Council needs to hear this music for themselves." Casey Mitchell collapsed onto the ground as the final notes of the council calling song faded into silence. Her hands were shaking from 3 days of continuous playing, and her throat was dry from singing harmonies she had never imagined possible. Beside her, Danny Brooks slowly lowered his violin. His eyes filled with tears of exhaustion, and joy dot around them. The Resonants were singing a new song. It was different from anything Casey had heard before, full of hope and celebration. Echo approached her and began a gentle melody that she recognized as gratitude. His voice was stronger than it had been in months, and other Resonants were joining in perfect harmony. "They're saying thank you," Dr. Helen Kim translated, her own voice filled with emotion. The council meeting was successful. They've agreed to share their harmonic restoration technology with the galaxy. Jake Morrison watched from nearby as Pete Collins finished shutting down the amplification equipment that had made the planet-wide communication possible. The technical solution had worked perfectly, allowing the Resonant Council to meet virtually for the first time in months. Commander Vex's ship had landed near their performance site an hour earlier. The Hegemony leader had insisted on experiencing the Resonant music directly, and what he heard had changed his entire perspective on the situation. "I have never experienced anything like this," Vex said to Jake as they watched the celebration around them. "My species communicates through strength and dominance. But this music speaks to something deeper. It creates understanding without conquest." Amy Rodriguez approached with a smile on her face. "Commander, I'm receiving messages from across the Prostatur galaxy. Word about the successful communication is spreading fast. Several species are already requesting information about harmonic restoration technology." Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Not only had they prevented a war, but they had opened up new possibilities for the entire galaxy. The Resonant Technology could help heal damaged planets throughout known space. Casey slowly stood up, her legs still unsteady from the long performance. Echo continued singing to her, and she was beginning to understand his message without translation. "He's telling me about their restoration technology," she said to the group. "It's not just about fixing environmental damage. They can use sound. Waves to help ecosystems heal themselves, to encourage plant growth, and even to clean polluted water." Danny wiped sweat from his forehead. "And they want to teach this technology to other species?" Echo's harmony confirmed Danny's understanding. But the residents' next musical phrase contained a condition that made Casey smile. "They'll share the technology," Casey explained, "but only with species that agree to protect acoustic environments on planets where sound-sensitive beings live. They want to create galactic noise pollution standards." Pete Collins laughed. "That's brilliant. They're using their technology as leverage to protect not just themselves, but any other species that might have similar needs." Over the following days, representatives from dozens of species arrived at Symphonia to witness the harmonic restoration technology in action. The residents demonstrated how controlled sound waves could accelerate plant growth, purify contaminated soil, and even repair atmospheric damage. Casey and Danny found themselves in the unique position of being the galaxy's first musical ambassadors. They worked with teams of linguists and musicians from other species to develop new communication protocols based on harmonic principles. "It's amazing," Danny said as he practiced a simple conversation with a young resident. "Once you understand that music can carry complex ideas, it opens up completely new ways of thinking about communication." The industrial operations that have been causing the noise pollution agreed to retrofit their equipment with sound-dampening technology. In exchange, they received access to resonant acoustic techniques that actually made their operations more efficient. Commander Vex became an unexpected ally in the process. He convinced the Hegemony Council to support the new acoustic protection standards, arguing that the harmonic restoration technology was too valuable to risk losing. "My people have always believed that strength comes from conquest," Vex explained to Jake during one of their meetings. "But the humans have shown us that strength can also come from bringing different voices together in harmony." 3 months later, Casey and Danny returned to Earth as heroes. But more importantly, they had established something new in galactic politics. The performance protocol became the official term for using artistic expression and cultural communication in diplomatic situations. Music schools across human space began offering courses in interspecies harmonic communication. Young musicians competed for the chance to serve as cultural ambassadors, learning to communicate with alien species through shared artistic expression. Casey stood on the same street corner in Seattle where she had performed before her adventure began. But now her music was different. The melodies she played carried harmonies she had learned from the resonance, creating something entirely new, a fusion of human and alien musical traditions. Danny joined her for their evening performance, as he had done countless times before. But their audience now included beings from across the galaxy, all drawn by the story of how 2 Street musicians have prevented an interstellar war through the power of music. "Do you ever regret going?" Danny asked Casey as they finished their performance and packed up their instruments. Casey looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them was Symphonia, where the residents were singing their ancient songs once again. "Never," she said. "Music was always about bringing people together. Now we know it can bring entire species together." Back on Symphonia, Echo and his people continued to work with galactic scientists to develop new applications for harmonic restoration technology. Damaged worlds throughout the galaxy were beginning to heal, and the resonant songs of celebration could be heard across the stars. The performance protocol had proven that sometimes the most powerful weapon against conflict was not advanced technology or military force, but the simple human ability to listen, to learn, and to create something beautiful together with others. In the years that followed, other species began developing their own versions of cultural diplomacy. Visual artists worked with species that communicated through color and light. Dancers learned to speak with beings that expressed themselves through movement. Storytellers found ways to share narratives with species that thought in completely different ways. But it all started with two young musicians who believed that music could bridge any gap, no matter how wide. Their performance on Sinfonia became known as the Symphony of Species, and it marked the beginning of a new era in galactic relations. Casey and Danny continued to perform on Earth, but they also traveled throughout the galaxy as ambassadors of human culture. They taught other species about improvisation, about finding harmony in differences, and about the courage it takes to create something beautiful in the face of uncertainty. The galaxy had learned an important lesson, that understanding between different peoples didn't require everyone to be the same. It required everyone to be willing to listen, to learn, and to add their own voice to the great symphony of life among the stars. And sometimes, when the conditions were just right, and the performers were brave enough to try, that symphony could save entire worlds.